Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Micah with Coronavirus Diaries, and today I am fortunate enough to speak again with Marc Holley, security consultant and practitioner, owner of Atlas Defense. Marc, for the viewers that haven't had the privilege of meeting you or know much about you, why don't you share just a little bit about who are you, where are you from?
Sure. Thanks, Micah. And thanks for having me on, and my cat apparently too, one of them. But yeah, like Micah said, my name is Marc, and a lot of my experience that led me to kind of in the profession that I find myself now is my time mostly in the Marine Corps, but also in the private sector as a military police officer, embedded police advisor for foreign militaries, range from Afghanistan, South Africa, and other service members too. So I took a lot of that experience combined with my corporate security experience or my private security experience, and decided to start my own business, Atlas Defense, about 4 years ago now. And we were making pretty good headway with workplace violence prevention training and defensive firearms coaching, trying to cover both ends of the spectrum there until coronavirus hit. And we've since had to pivot and start supporting some other services and putting some things online. But my experience and resume and whatnot is still needed, so that's why I find myself at least still at work and providing some consulting and background work, trying to use some of my experience to just adapt to what's going on right about now, because we're in uncharted waters, and I feel like that's why I'm, for better or worse, prepared for this and doing what I can to help out. Yeah.
Speaking of prepared, before we jumped on and started our session, we were just catching up a little bit, and we had talked a little bit, or you'd shared about kind of some of your own research and understandings of what's happening with security currently. Is, going into this, there was kind of this narrative where, aside from the toilet paper surge of purchases, there's guns and ammo being purchased. Yeah. Guilty myself of going and getting a little bit more ammo, not so much the toilet paper. But it was kind of this, we're talking a week, 2 weeks before the state lockdown. Obviously in the cities, the Twin Cities, there's a couple million people here. So let's just dive into this a little bit. You'd shared some interesting information that is kind of coming out right now that you're discovering. This thought process,
preliminary stuff,
this thought process, like I had and like so many other people had of, okay, if suddenly there's COVID starts wreaking havoc on the economy, on all this stuff, the potential for crime. I think we had all seen that something about domestic violence had increased. Without having to go too far into that, the idea of crime overall in a society getting rampant and out of control. You found some interesting stuff. Share a little bit. Sure. It's interesting.
And a lot of this, again, comes from just like leaning on some of my experience in interpreting these trends and stats and whatnot too. I did study law enforcement for a while at St. Thomas when I was a military police officer, and I learned enough to know that I wanted to be an entrepreneur more than a cop. But it gave me a good lens, like I said, though, to kind of look at these stats and look for these patterns and trends, and just applying a little bit of like sociology too, and figuring out what motivates people, or what are the needs right about now. And especially in my line of work, people do come to me asking, like how to cope with this kind of stuff and how safe are they. And I always tell them, it'll depend on your training, but on the macro scale, like on what's happening, even just within the Twin Cities, I initially had a hunch, and now there's some preliminary information that shows that crime is decreasing in the Twin Cities. And I can't speak for the other cities throughout the United States, because even 100 years ago, Minneapolis, or Minnesota in general, was a little bit of an outlier in the performance and how they were able to beat the virus.
Sure.
So Minneapolis might be an outlier, but I think that you might see a common trend in first world countries that crime is, if not plateaued, maybe even starting to decrease. And that's despite, like you're saying, some perceptions that are out there that there's going to be less stability and more crime and whatnot. And I think that when you think about what people are motivated by, or like what is happening right now, most crime is crime of opportunity. And the opportunity has to be there for somebody to be vulnerable or not aware of their surroundings. And that's usually, those random people that are taking the wrong route instead of a well-lit route. Maybe they took a shortcut down a dark alley, or some of
Sure.
those things that, you know, people don't really think all the way through until the threat's on top of them. So with criminals, you know, again, I can't speak for organized crime or anything like that, but again, when you're thinking about like what is a crime of opportunity, home invasions, for example, people think that home invasions might increase, but the fact is that a would-be thief or home invader is looking for the easiest target, right? They're looking for the home that's empty, and if they're aware that most people are home right now, I wouldn't be surprised to see that home invasions are dropping.
Sure.
There's obviously still going to, like, I still work for the Citizen app. I think we talked about that last time.
Yeah, last session.
Yeah, and I get notifications for every single 911 call that's being placed in the Twin Cities area. And it's annoying sometimes because you see a lot of them, right? And again, if you just focus just on that information that's right at your fingertips, like right there on the app that's there for the purpose of reporting it, again, it's easy to think that crime is increasing and things are always bad. But as you said, I think there's like 3.3 million people that live in the metro area. And if you start looking at some of the actual crime stats around here, like it's not that violent that people would think that it is. And a lot of that is based in like the 1990s perception that gave us that namesake of Murderapolis.
Murderapolis, yeah.
Right. And that was from a combination of corruption and gang activity, sure. But that was something that happened like a few decades ago. And people still want to, you know, sometimes it's easier just to use that frame of mind to think of something, even though it's, you know, 3 decades down the road. So I don't know. That's just stuff that I've noticed.
So neither one of us are, that I'm aware of. I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist by any means. Why do you think it is that in a time when there's so much uncertainty, unemployment is skyrocketing? Like, why? Like, what, aside from the fact that everybody's home now and the target of opportunity, it's a real thing. But it's almost like I'm seeing a lot of community outreach and a lot more. It's almost like people are being more socially conscious now. I mean,
it's like every block that I've been around, I've seen there's usually at least like one community pantry out where it's either like a table or in the entryway of the apartment building or just somewhere along the block when I'm riding my bike or walking my dog. Yeah, you see there are a lot of people are stepping up and sharing what they can, doing it responsibly. Which, like I said, I think that's why it's always more likely that individual people are going to solve problems rather than waiting for the government to do anything. Because, you know, a stimulus check is going to be nice, but, you know, Heidi and I have a commercial lease that we still have to keep on top of our regular lease and whatnot.
Is that's still going on? Figure it out, but is that still going on even with the lockdown? They're saying that you have to still pay on the lease itself.
Yeah, as far as we rough. Just found out today that the lockdown was extended through through May 4th.
Yeah.
So with this new information, that might change some things. I'm not going to hold my breath though, and neither is Heidi.
You know, I have a sister that's in Florida, and I know before their governor ever said, okay, or their mayor, I'm not sure. I think it was the governor eventually came down and said, all right, statewide lockdown. Leading up to that, she had taken it upon herself to shut her business down just based on her clients. She was a hairdresser. I didn't want to basically create an environment where it could spread from people to people to people.
Yeah.
But she was having this difficulty with the notion of she shut it down. She effectively cut off her own income, but she still had to pay. It was a significant amount. Like these commercial, anybody that doesn't have a commercial lease, it's no joke. You know, it's business, and she, you know, that her issue was like how much she was hemorrhaging.
And that's a hard decision to make. Okay, cool. Yeah, and that's a really hard place to be in because you want to stay on top of your professional commitments, the leases and whatnot, because that's just business, and like it doesn't have the same consideration as residential stuff. So
yeah, it was a little bit of a tangent away from security,
but yeah, I mean, I respect her for making that decision though, and that's again one of those reasons why I think everybody being in this shared misery, right? Everybody to your left and right is going through the same thing right now. And that's why people aren't killing each other for the groceries. And I think I sent you that. I might have sent you that video by Sheriff of Baghdad, Shrek, his name is. But he made a 1-minute video where all he pointed out, he's like, things really aren't that bad as people are panicking about because you're not killing your neighbor for groceries, right? People are stepping up, they're helping one another out. Like, again, like it's easy to assume that people are either being directly impacted by it, or maybe they're one or two people removed from it, but everybody's being impacted by this right now. And that's, again, like maybe that shared suffering is why crime is dropping right now. And if we had stuff to look back onto, maybe we should look at other countries that have gone through like civil wars or something, and seeing if crime drops during that kind of stuff.
It's an interesting verbiage you used shared suffering, because what ended up happening is, she had been paying this weekly lease fee for the space she was in, which surprised me how expensive it was.
Yeah.
But once the governor finally said, all right, it's a lockdown, the building, the people that were renting that space, for her to have her business in, or the lease, they just said, all right, you don't have to pay anymore. And I don't know how far, like where that goes or how that works out.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
But it's kind of one of those things where hopefully, they'll reciprocate whoever you're dealing with. Either there's government kickbacks and that, but so security, man, it's kind of.
So yeah, again, like those are all those basic needs people are trying to fulfill on top of their feeling of their sense of safety and security too. So I noticed that there's a lot of like traditional gun owners that like to rag on all the new gun owners too. All this huge rush, this influx of gun buyers. I've seen, there's a lot of animosity towards these new gun buyers, with judgments about these people that they're turncoats, or they're hypocrites for being opposed to guns and not buying a gun. Sure. The fact is again, like those like anti-gun views and pro-gun views that are that extreme are the 10% on the right and left, and it's the 80% people that are in the middle that share that common ground that are now deciding to buy a gun.
Yeah.
And that's what I've noticed, that I think it's interesting, is they're buying the guns now for the same reason that traditional gun owners have bought guns for as long as we could have.
Right.
It's for that feeling of safety.
Yeah. So back in the day, buying the firearms for home defense, or hunting, or sporting,
feeding your family. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think this is just that 80%, like I said, just there's average people that are that have always been in the middle, that share the common ground, that are going to be responsible gun owners too, as long as they have access to good information, and don't make the same assumptions that their predecessors made about the safety of like how to store a firearm or who to let borrow your guns.
Speaking of the guns thing, though, I did have an interesting, and I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus here, but the last, for anybody that didn't hear the last session between me and Mark, you can check it out in the feed. But we had talked a bit about the notion of somebody, a first-time buyer that's suddenly, whether people think they're panicking or not, it's just this idea of like, it would be good to have some sort of home defense, because you just want to, I want to believe it's common sense that you should have something in your home to defend your home. Whether you believe about carrying it out in public is another thing. But we talked about first-time gun buyers, and like, if you haven't had training experience, you've never fired the gun. Now, I don't even know, you can go to a gun range. I don't know, it's considered essential. Maybe some outdoor ranges, which after this, I'm going to ask you about some outdoor ranges.
I got some answers for that.
Right. Yeah. Because I'm looking forward to some outdoor time.
Yeah.
But the funny thing that ended up happening was somebody that, to the best of my understanding, this individual was not a gun owner. And then they had shared a picture with me. They had a precision military grade 308 caliber sniper rifle that they had just picked up for home defense. And I'm like, dude, can't tell you enough how that is not what you want for home defense. It's like this monster rifle with rail systems and no scope and no iron sights and nothing. I'm just like, dude, you're going to put your neighbors at risk, and you're going to put your neighbors at risk, because that one round is going to, I'm just like, so it's in some capacity, like it's almost like there should be some sort of a,
but he contacted you, right?
Well, yeah, that was the thing is, it's just because I kind of pushed some information out about like, it's good to be prepared. It's good to be ready. You should be willing to defend yourself in your own home. So then they send this picture of like this big gigantic rifle. And then I'm like, yeah, that's not what you want. And then they said that, oh yeah, well, I got this other one that's shipping. And I'm like, yeah, that's not what. I'm like, why didn't you just get a shotgun? And they're like, I don't know, because this is what I wanted. I'm like, all right, well, it's it is what it is, but that's
anyways.
some stuff. When you one of the things that you do aside from the security work you do, the security consulting with Atlas Defense, is firearms instructing.
Yeah.
What would you say is your number one kind of when a new person comes in and they're like, I want to learn about guns? What's like a really common thing that you have to kind of instill in them, or you kind of have to bring them up to speed on like firearm safety?
I usually tell them, don't buy a gun until after your first class. And that's usually just a best practice so people can learn everything that they need to learn. Just maybe even if it is an introductory level class, it's like an hour to 3. It depends on what they're looking for.
Yeah.
But yeah, try to learn as much as you can before you go out and buy a gun. Don't just buy a gun and then try to work backwards.
Sure.
Because when you buy a gun without practicing with it or finding it if it fits you, or even knowing if the gun is going to be the best fit for where you live or where you're at now, it just requires a little bit of research and just asking questions, which I think like any gun owner now would probably say they would have wished they had done sooner. Is just learn as much as you can so you can make a more informed decision and get the most out of your money too. Because I think that's the other part with like right now with like the economic impact and people trying to be smart about their money. A gun's a good investment because it holds its value. If anything, it's probably going to increase in value.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's you're going to have to ask yourself, like, how do I want to spend this $500 to $1,000 on this one piece of equipment that I may never use, but I'm going to need it. I'm going to be glad that I had it if I needed it.
Right.
So I can understand that train of thought, but it's also, it's a really calculated choice because there's a lot more at stake now between money and your family.
I think it just illustrates a point as to the benefits of not acting hastily to make any decisions as opposed to kind of taking a slower calculated approach. Security, it's, what is the, don't panic. Because when you do that, typically, you end up making bad decisions.
Yeah.
But, cool.
But yeah, besides that, I mean, I've mostly just been trying to stay active too. I like that Citizen app because I can just take a bike ride for a couple hours or something and get some content. So that's been something that gives me a little bit of time out and perspective and just gives me some place to be.
Speaking of the Citizens app, we talked about that in the last session, and it sounded like at least the initial information or data that you were kind of seeing it sounded like about 2 weeks ago, crimes were typically taking place late in the evening until early hours of the morning, kind of the typical bar close, workers start going to work in the morning. And then it sounded like it kind of spread out when is it still, has there really been any kind of changes that you've noticed in terms of
I'm going to pull it up here now. Let me see here. Yeah. And I think it's been pretty steady from what I've noticed.
It's just kind of, it is what it is.
Yeah. If I look at the highlights, for right now, what is it? Like 4:30, there's like 5 ongoing things, but there's been a pretty regular stream for most of the day.
For a city of 3.3 million, 5 isn't such a scary number.
And that's it. And that's the funny thing about like, when you look at like really hyper local information, sometimes it can blow things out of perspective, but like you're saying too, like it can give you a better view of the macro when you do zoom out a little bit.
Sure.
And notice that we're in a city with 3 million people. And, and, if you follow a Crime Watch page or, a Crime Watch app and whatnot, it just depends on your perspective, I guess, when you go into it. And I don't know. I think I try to be magnanimous when I look into anything. I want to learn as much as I can before I make a decision. So maybe that's why I pulled this conclusion out of the crime stuff that I've seen. And again, like I said, I'm really interested in being able to get the actual numbers from the city of Minneapolis too. Sure. So I already tried to contact the reporter that put that information in I think it's a Star Tribune article. So I can send you the article at least, but I'm waiting on the author to get back to me too.
Sure.
With the source, because I'm pretty sure, I don't think that they would make I think Star Tribune is pretty reputable, but I don't think they would make a claim like that. Yeah, I don't think that they would be able to make a claim like that if they didn't have some kind of information to back it up. So maybe I've got my own confirmation bias. I was expecting a spike like everybody else was, and then I'm like, again, like we're not a third world country. We're not But not in a military, we don't already live in a militarized state. So it's going to be a pretty big leap to go from where we're at now to what people are scared of. And
I mean,
just be
what you're
important to be mindful of that gap. Yeah.
yeah, what you're sharing right now is very I mean, it's great. Due diligence. It's the number one thing that anybody that's watching this, viewers, listeners, anybody that's doing anything, right? Do your due diligence. Don't just take a headline for what it is. Don't just take random information that somebody shares on social media for what it is. You know, the notion that you're looking to who authored this document, and then not only that, but like what's the information that you use to, you know, write this? You know, why? Like, can I believe it? You're like taking that due diligence, and that's it's a great trait or kind of process to go through in terms of consuming any sort of information to help cut down.
We've got the time now too, right?
Just
I
a
got all
little
the time
bit.
in the world.
Speaking of time, I know we're getting kind of towards the end of this. Was there anything that you wanted to touch base on? I know it sounds like since the last time we talked, you found yourself into a pretty solid position in security again.
But I'm keeping Atlas Defense up and running too, actually. And the speaking of like the right to carry and all that kind of stuff, I've actually been able to set up a bi-weekly online permit to carry webinar. So I basically lead the class like we're doing right now in the Zoom video chat. Get the classroom portion done in about 5 hours, and then everybody is individually arranging their live fire qualification. So.
Oh, and you're able to go out with them on the spot?
I don't even have to be out there. They just have to send me a picture, a video of them going through the course of fire and picture of the target. And they have to score better than, I think, 80% to pass on a silhouette size target. And it's actually a pretty simple process. So
and this is something that you worked with the state on, or how did you go? How were you able to?
They've already, well, the thing is that the state has already approved online courses, I think about 2 years ago. So a lot of people were offering it in like a preset online course. So just like pre-recorded segments that you can just click on through.
Sure.
And I've never really been a big fan of that approach because there's no opportunity for discussion or questions from the student to the instructor.
Sure.
And that's just kind of a cop-out in my opinion. Maybe, that's not just because I'm competitive, but I think it's on the educational side. Yeah, you're going to get a lot more value out of having a live webinar with a real experience, like actual instructor, instead of an enthusiast that threw something together because they want to hook their buddies up. So
sure.
That's why I've also decided to make this a pay what you want class. This is the first product that I've had where I just put it on sliding scale. I don't care if it's $5 or $75. I'm letting people pay what they want, and it's been pretty cool to see like people step up and cover the course fee of other people or donate ammunition and help it grow. So that's why I ended up having to do it every 2 weeks now because there's a really good positive response from when I started it.
Awesome. That's way cool to hear. So as far as and now you said that was for a concealed carry class?
For Minnesota permanent carry. Yep.
How do you do? Because isn't there's background checks that has to happen, fingerprints, I believe.
The sheriff's office is still open 5 days a week. I think from like 9:30 to 3:30 p.m. the downtown one. And throughout Minnesota, as far as I've been able to tell, all sheriff's offices are still open and taking applications. Okay. You just have to get that valid certificate. So going through the class and showing me the results of the live fire, as long as they pass, we'll get them that certificate that I deliver. If they're in Minneapolis, I actually just ride my bike out to them. I got an excuse to work out.
Yeah, man.
Otherwise, I just mail it out to them.
And then that course can be found on atlasdefensemn.com.
Yep, it's on my homepage on my website, and I'll send you a link that goes directly to the
links below for any of the viewers, listeners. All of Marc's information will be there. Well, Marc, I can't say enough how thankful I am to have. Did you have something else?
Oh, no, I was just saying that I think everybody has something to contribute to solving this or mitigating it. And, I find my unique ways of doing that. And like we were talking about, I didn't know what would happen if I hadn't taken the gig that I have now. But I feel like what I'm doing now is in some way impacting it. I like to think of myself as that maybe. And I think you're doing something. Yeah, I think you're doing something similar by documenting all of this too. So I think that anybody that's watching should remember that like you do probably have some kind of skill set that can bring value to solving this or mitigating this. So even if it is just staying inside, but think about your skill set. I'm sure everybody's got something to contribute. Yeah.
Outstanding. Well, Marc, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your insights. For the viewers, listeners, hope you got something out of it. A lot of good information, and the notion that you're like taking information, you're doing your due diligence, you're conceiving your own intelligence based on like your research. That's a major takeaway that I get from this is, just because someone says it's going to, like, crime is going to increase, go and do your own research and actually ask some questions. And it's cool that you reached out to the author. It'd be interesting to hear what you get back as far as the information that you shared. But until next time, thanks for joining us, viewers, listeners. All of Marc's information is in the links below. And until next time, stay tuned. We got more coming for you later.